Good evening. Hello there, everyone out in Boston. Welcome to another session of Toward a Quality of Life. We're here in the month of October, the year 2004, and tonight I'm going to talk to you about one of my most passionate, if not my most passionate, that I frequently talk about, and that is the help and care of animals that are in such dire need, the compassion we need to show, and the action we need to produce to help animals. And just to give you an example of what I'm talking about, I'm going to hold up briefly the picture of one animal, for example, of a kind of animal that's in need that I'm going to be talking about tonight. You see this woof woof? These are the kind of creatures that we really care about and we really want to get to know more about. The poor lonely animals that are not sitting on some cushy throne in Back Bay eating fine food and taking nice walks on the common, but are in distress. Now, to help me with this endeavor tonight, I have a distinguished guest who is, if I might say your age, I don't know, well, she's a young, very young person who studied graphic design originally, and instead of following graphic design, she quote-unquote followed her heart and went to work at the Animal Rescue League of Boston, of which there are four facilities or four operations in the state of Massachusetts. And this person's name is Ms. Melissa Cox. And she is the Adoption Supervisor at the Animal Rescue League in Boston. And with her tonight is the triply distinguished guest who sits on her lap named Ella.
Yes.
And Ella is a feline, otherwise known as a cat, otherwise known as a pussy, otherwise known as a furball with whiskers, who doesn't quite see well, has lost most of her sight because she did not get a diet that had enough taurine in it, Taurine. And so she's practically blind now, but apparently she was adopted by Melissa at the Animal Rescue League. Now, Melissa, it's your turn to talk. Maybe you could tell us, how did you get Ella?
Ella was turned into us by her owner because they were moving. And she came to the Animal Rescue League, and she moved up to adoption. And when she was there, the way that I actually ended up adopting her was she got a cold. So I fostered her, and we have a foster care program which provides temporary homes for animals. And then
Oh, you mean you took her home to take care of her?
I took her home to take care of her with the idea that she would go back to the adoption center to find a permanent home. We then found out she was blind, and I just fell in love. So now she's been with me for over a year, and I love her to death.
So she's a lucky, lucky cat.
She is.
Yes.
She's very lucky.
Yes. Well, it's a privilege to have both of you here. Let's start out with what the Animal Rescue League is. The name says that you rescue animals. You're
Yes.
a league that rescues animals. When did it start? Why did it start? And how do you keep it going?
We are a league that rescues animals. That's one of our primary functions.
Oh, it's not your only function?
Nope. We do rescue, we do adoptions, we do low-cost spay-neuter, we do humane education, we have a volunteer program, so we have a lot of different functions, but definitely rescuing is one of the primary functions. And it started over 100 years ago. A wonderful woman, Anna Harris Smith, in 1899 decided that she wanted to do something about horses that were being neglected on the streets of Boston, the work horses. And so she founded the Animal Rescue League of Boston. And her mission was to provide welfare to these horses, and then it went from there. It expanded from work horses to dogs, cats, and now we see all sorts of animals.
Did it start with the horses being discarded or while they were working? Do you know?
I think it was a little bit of both. It was while they were working, the conditions they were working. So she really was an advocate towards pushing quality life for these work horses, and also for ones that perhaps were getting neglected, providing shelter for them as well.
Well, I I remember my father telling me when he was a young lad, some 100 years ago, just about, a horse had worked so well all its life. That's what horses did. They worked very hard, and they're
Right.
still in terrible straits now, getting captured in the West and slaughtered and used as meat and all that, and even killed to just dwindle their numbers and land taken away from them. But anyway, that's the horse's life. Horses have worked and worked and worked. They've just worked for human beings. And my father remembered when we went by a certain place of his boyhood, he remembered at a very old age how he had been standing with one or two persons and this horse that had worked all its life and couldn't work anymore, and they shot it right there, dead, because it was of no use anymore. And I know that sort of crippled my father to a degree emotionally.
Right. And I'm sure that's the sort of things that Anna Harris Smith was seeing. And so rather than have that happen, she decided to do something about it and founded the Animal Rescue League of Boston. And that branch was in Dedham. We still have a barn there for large horses and livestock. And so her legacy does continue in that way.
So livestock ends up having to come to the Animal Rescue League? Why is that?
Sometimes it's just that people get them and don't know how to care for them, or with horses maybe get overwhelmed with the cost of caring for them. So a lot of it is perhaps a lack of education, that people don't know what type of animal they're getting into. So we do get a variety of different livestock in Dedham.
So it is very costly to keep a horse, isn't it?
Oh yeah, yes.
In the thousands per year.
I would imagine between boarding and food and vet care, and they're
They
expensive.
eat a lot, yes. So you have to foot the bill. You have to care for these animals when they
Yes.
come to you.
Yes.
And how do you pay for these very expensive services?
We, contrary I think to popular knowledge, we actually run all on private donations. We don't get public funding. So everything that we're able to provide for them comes from private donations, endowments, and just generosity and based on the public. And the more generosity there is, the more we're able to do. So it's so important. And we do charge some adoption fees, which cover minimal costs, but not nearly all we do put in to care for them.
So do you have people like Channel 2 does that work on fundraising?
Yes.
You have a whole group of people?
We have a development department that does work towards that, because it's so important.
And so your budget, you don't know what it is, but it must be very high.
Right, to run all 4 branches, I would imagine it has to be in the millions of dollars a year. It's not cheap.
No, it's not cheap.
So,
and ladies and gentlemen, I don't believe in giving money to things. I figure if you walk down the street, you can see someone at your own will to give money to in a second almost. There's needy people and needy things all over the place. But if you have money and you feel a compassion for the animals, wouldn't this be a wonderful thing to give some money to the Animal Rescue League? This is a very sad subject. Animals in terrible distress and terrible need, and let's get into a little bit more of what kind of animals come to you by and large, let's say in the Boston facility. Where do you find them? How do they get there?
We find them everywhere and anywhere. A lot of them come to us, they're what we're called owner surrenders, so they're people's pets that for one reason or another they can no longer keep them. There's a wide variety of different reasons that people bring them to us. If their landlord doesn't want the pet, if they're moving.
Tell me about if the landlord doesn't want the pet. How often does that happen?
It's one of our #1 reasons. And it is disheartening because it's part of the responsibility of pet ownership to make sure that they do have a place that they are allowed to live. And there are a lot of landlords that don't want pets for various reasons. And I think that it's important to know that before you move into an apartment, because we do see a lot that are turned in for that reason. And when people are faced with the dilemma of either you have to go or your pet goes, a lot of them might choose to bring the pet to a shelter. So it's really important to think about that before you bring a pet into your life.
What a heartbreaking thing. I remember years ago my landlord threatened me about my cat, for which I did have a clause that he was allowed. But then one cat soiled the carpet somewhere in the building, and my and someone said it was my cat, which it wasn't. But anyway, oh, what hell I went through with that harassment from the landlord telling me, you know, to remove the cat, as though it were a piece of garbage or a. And also, I'll say that I just saw a piece on television go by where in some states or some particular locale, the law is allowing people to keep their pets under the theory that pets are good for people. I don't believe in, I mean, that's a true theory, but I don't use that as a rationale. Pets just, you know, of their own have a right to live in dignity, whether they're good for people or not.
Right.
But apparently there have been challenges under some new rulings that pets are good for people, and when landlords say they've got to go, people have brought cases to court.
Well, and it is very true. I mean, they do have right to live, but they just emotionally, there's nothing better than having a pet. I mean, they're just so unconditional in their love and respect, and it is really disheartening when people do have to give up their pets, because a lot of people that come to our doors, it is very, very difficult for them, and it's very, very upsetting.
They're all upset when they do it?
Oh, yeah, because you develop a bond with that pet.
I should say.
And it's so hard to
I would think
lose
that
them.
sort of a guilt would remain with you for...
I would think so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I remember once I saw a picture on when we were in a recession in the early 80s, I believe. It showed times were so tough that a lady was bringing her dog to the Animal Rescue League, and the dog was turning back, pulling on the leash, looking at the lady, and was being taken off. You know, like, what are you doing? I can't get things like that out of my mind. I can't stand them. As I've told you already, I don't know how you do the work that you do. Now, I'm a chicken coward. I'm supposed to love animals, and I can't take hearing about the work that you do, even though I feel it's essential.
And it really, everyone that works there, we love animals, and you wouldn't be able to work there if you didn't. And we all know in our hearts that we care for them so much, and we love them so much that we do it because we care. And you have great days there, you have some bad days there, but overall you have to work there feeling that it's something that's necessary, and it's so much better for them to come to a shelter rather than just be, say, let loose or, you know, dumped somewhere, because that's much, much worse for animals.
You know what I've worried about sometime? I've worried about animals being let loose, being brought to a shelter, and maybe being sold to laboratories or something.
I can say the Animal Rescue League has never done that. That's horrifying.
I mean, to have one person in the system that on the side is, you know, just kind of moving an animal out, you know? We keep track of what animals are. We would know if mysteriously someone was missing, and those people shouldn't be working in a shelter because obviously they don't care for the animals. I don't know what places I can't really say who would do that, but it's not us, because that's... I worry about that, you know, a lot. You said there's many reasons the animals wind up there. One is they're not allowed by the landlords. Landlords find out about them. So, moral of the story, please, especially people going to college, they say, I'll get a cat to keep me company. I've seen that happen a lot in my own life, my own life experience with, and and then give it up because they're moving. It's just like you say, they're so they provide so much comfort and love. So it's a good love object,
Right.
And then give it up. That's really unfair. Really unfair. When you get an animal, you should have in mind that it's a commitment for life, till death do us
Right.
part.
And you think Ella, she's 2 years old, I'm 25, she's probably going to be around for the next 10, 15 years of my life. So people really have to think about, where am I going to be in 10, 15 years? With cats, some dogs don't live as long, but it's a long time commitment. So you really have to think of the long-term picture, not the, I'm going to be in an apartment that allows a pet for the next 9 months. Really long-term, how long they live.
Not even with little turtles, right?
No, turtles live probably longer than cats. Yeah.
They do? I didn't know that. But I mean, even a little turtle is not disposable. You
No.
can't just say, I'll have them while I'm here,
Right.
and then say, oh, it's just a turtle, give it to my neighbor or something like
Right.
that. Throw it away.
And humans, we're the ones who domesticated animals, so they're our responsibility to care for, because if it weren't for us, we wouldn't have domesticated cats and dogs to be our companions.
And how do you feel about taking animals on airplanes, in cargo, and, well, for example, that? How would you feel about that? Oh, putting them in kennels was my other thought.
Kennels,
like
boarding
say you're
kennels?
gone for a month. Say you have a lifestyle that puts you in town, out of town, in town, out of town. So you're boarding them a lot, or you're taking them on planes
Right.
a lot. What do you think?
Well, I think that if you have that type of lifestyle, perhaps a pet isn't good for you at that time. I think that if you're moving cross country, I do feel people should bring their pets with them. Airplanes are good now with cats in particular and smaller dogs. You can't actually bring them on. They designate certain types of carriers, and then you can actually bring them on the plane with you and just put them under the seat in front of you, which is fine. In terms of cargo, I've never been a dog flying in cargo. I can't imagine it's fun. But if that's the only way that someone can bring their pet with them, I think it's.
If it's a way of life, it's not a good thing.
I wouldn't say.
No, but
yeah.
if you have to move somewhere, you've got to bring your
Right.
you've got to bring your pet.
And if it's a pet that travels, well, let's
Yeah.
say you're traveling from a summer house in Florida or a winter house in Florida to a summer house on the Cape, and you have a pet that travels well, and you're going to be in the plane for a few hours, I think that's fine. But if you're someone who goes away on business trips 1 to 2 weeks out of every month, that would, I think, be difficult.
Yeah, and it would be difficult on the
A
pet.
difficult lifestyle to have a pet.
Exactly. But on the other hand, don't let us deter you, because I think this would be a great place to give your dollars if you have it in your heart to give dollars. And B, if you have it in your heart to make a commitment for the life of an animal, as long as that animal lives till death do you part. There's lots of animals to adopt at the Animal Rescue League, and sometimes the most forlorn ones can touch you the most deeply.
Right. And the thing is that we do need financial support, and we do need adopters, but there's so many other ways for people to help. Foster care, which I mentioned with Ella, if you are a business person, and let's say you do travel a week out of every month, our foster care program, we need homes for animals who perhaps come in with some injury and need to go home and heal, or some orphaned kittens that maybe need to have 2 or 3 weeks before we can adopt them out. We need foster parents to take those animals in and give them the love they need for that period of time, so they can come back and find their permanent homes. And that's another way that people can help. And we always need more foster homes. So.
Can people be gone for the day and be foster caretakers?
Yes,
they
definitely.
can.
Yep.
Okay. Now, you had said there's many reasons animals end up at the Animal Rescue League. One is, God forbid, that you get an animal and the landlord says, get rid of the animal. Make sure that doesn't happen. Don't get involved if that's a possibility. What are some other reasons?
Some other reasons are too active or no time. So it's perhaps you get a pet and then you don't have enough time to care for it. That can be somewhat averted by doing a little bit of research before you bring a pet into your life to make sure that you are getting a pet that you do have enough time to devote to, and really analyzing your lifestyle to make sure that you have the time. Cost is another big thing. People that get pets without really thinking about the financial responsibility, and not necessarily the day-to-day expenses of food and litter and treats and whatnot, but vet bills and emergency visits. That's a huge thing. I mean, emergency trips, emergencies happen to everyone. Accidents happen to all pets, and it's really expensive.
Very expensive.
Very expensive.
And we've got a curious feeling about paying for medical care for pets. No matter, you don't feel it's quite as important as it would be were it your family member of a human, too. So you have mixed feelings about it a lot, too, if you don't know that you can commit that way. Right,
and different people, you get a wide spectrum of different views on that. There's lots of people that say, I will spend whatever it needs to get that pet better. And then there's some people that just don't want or can't afford it. And one of the things we always do tell our adopters is to try to have a plan for that and try to educate them on the realities of pet ownership and what it does cost.
So what do you think if someone didn't have a lot of bucks and they could never afford an emergency bill that could run into the hundreds or thousands, beyond the immediate day, but they could give a great home and buy food and provide for shots and whatever else, that kind of care, should they go ahead and do it?
I think they should go ahead, but with a plan. For instance, you can get very minimal pet insurance plans that will cover sort of catastrophes. If your dog eats a sock and it gets lodged in its stomach, there's pet insurance plans that do that. You can even just try to tuck away a few dollars every month. It sounds really silly. And of course, not all pets are going to have emergencies. But perhaps if you're one of those people that can provide a really great home and basic medical care, you want to be even more careful with your pet's lifestyle. So don't have an indoor-outdoor cat that might get into a cat fight or something. Maybe have an indoor-only cat who's at less risk for having those emergency type situations.
How do you feel like if the cat were to get cancer and the treatment would be prohibitive to euthanize, be a great caretaker, but rather than give that extended care that's so costly? What do you think?
Well, I think you have to,
if you can't afford it, if you really can't.
If the animal's suffering and you really can't afford it, I think you have to do what's humane for that animal. And the reality is, as not everyone is going to be able to afford that as their pet gets older, but if you give them, we'd rather see an animal have 1 or 2 years of great quality of life than 12 of mediocre. So it's quality, not quantity.
I agree. I think if you could love a pet and be committed to that pet, even if you wouldn't have super funds, by all means.
Right. But it is important, too, to think of, there's some people that perhaps can't even provide the basic necessities. So that's important to factor in.
It is costly. The damn food, it goes down. You just buy a few cans and you've got to buy a few more.
Yeah.
And sometimes they don't like the one that's cheaper. They like the one that's expensive. And,
of course.
I'll show you a picture of another critter that we're talking about. How's that for a little kitty there that needs adoption down at the Animal Rescue League, or at least did need adoption at some time?
Yep.
There's another kitty.
That's Max.
That's Max.
Max was adopted.
Oh, Max was adopted.
Max was adopted.
Max was adopted. There you go.
And he was an animal, a cat. The thing about cats is that they don't all adjust to different environments as well as some dogs do. So Max was a cat who came to us, and we ask owners to fill out profiles when they come in, which is great because it gives us information on what they were like in their home. And he had a fantastic profile, said he was a lap cat, very affectionate. And when at the shelter, he got a little bit cranky, I think just from the stress. And so a lot of people overlooked him because of how he was presenting himself. And we stuck with him. It took us, I think, nearly 3 months to adopt him out. But someone took a chance on him, and he's doing wonderfully today. And so he's one of these special cases where there are animals in shelters that do need people to take a chance on them and have faith that they will be great companions.
It's been my experience generally with animals and humans, let's say geriatric humans, that are cranky and ornery and say all the wrong things at all the wrong times, that you can love them the deepest.
Yes, they have the most personality.
You just, I don't know, your heart opens up more and the bond is even stronger.
Right.
Now I don't want people to think, oh, like we saw the picture of Max, it's wonderful, some are getting adopted. I want you to understand, for purposes of giving money, if you have money to give, because I love animals so much and I know so many of you love animals, and this is very good work, this is very decent work that I don't have the stomach for, and maybe some of you wouldn't have the stomach for it either. It's so heartbreaking. I don't want you to think everything's rosy, that animals just get adopted. This is heartbreaking work that entails, I don't know what, but guts of steel for people to care enough to be there for these animals that are in terrible, terrible straits. Tell us some of the other reasons and, not so pleasant ones, so people could understand of what you might see might be at the Animal Rescue League.
Well, if there's a picture in there of an orange cat, Timmy, him.
I could see that this was, I could see by the picture.
So he is also another happy story, but I think he's reflective of why it's so important why we need support. He's a cat who was picked up who had suffered some injury. You can see his legs are a little bit funny there. And he didn't have any use of his back legs. He could feel them, but he didn't have any use of them. Somehow they were broken. And he is a cat that needed 2 major surgeries to get him better. And we have been fortunate that people donated money to him to be able to provide him with those surgeries. He's had 1. He's doing great. He's in a foster home right now. And then his next surgery is actually going to fix his legs, so he will be able to walk again. But we see a lot of Timmies, and we're not able to help all of them simply because of the financial constraints. And so it's another great opportunity for people to help out is if they do want to do these, donate to help us with extra medical costs and help us provide the funds to do work up more of these special medical cases and be able to provide them with homes. And those are hard cases because we would like to be able to have the unlimited resources to help all the Timmies that come through our door. But that's not the reality.
So you have a lot of animals that come in that have some kind of injury, some kind of suffering, some kind of pain. Well, just abandonment is a major pain of all.
Right. Yeah, but that is a major emotional pain. But we get animals that do have come in with injuries, some more severe than Timmy, some less severe. And those things, they're not routine medical checks and they're not routine surgeries, and they perhaps need specialists or to go see a cardiologist or a veterinary dentist or something like that. And those costs do add up. They add up for us like they do for owners.
But these are animals that don't have anyone to take responsibility for them.
Right.
They're brought to you because the owner can't afford it.
Right, or they're found.
They're found
that way.
wandering. Somebody calls up and says there's a stray cat.
Yep, stray cat hit by a car or a stray cat stuck in a fence or something like that.
Uh-huh.
And so we really, I think, do our best to try to help as many as we can, but what we have exceeds what we can provide.
So you really try, if you can at all save a cat, you try to financially.
Yes.
And a lot of times, of course, you can't. An animal, you can't
Right.
save them financially. This would be too much of a
Right.
burden. And then there are those that you can't help at all, and yet they're still alive.
Right, the ones that, for us, they may come to us in such bad shape that for us, the most humane thing we can do is to put them to sleep and stop their pain. And we get those into, and it's heart-wrenching because it's never easy to do, but it's better that than have them suffer. So it's a balance. It's definitely a balance of what we can do for them and then what's realistic as well.
I believe you told me you have 4 ambulances working just in the Boston
Yep.
area. So that means there's enough business, unfortunately, if one were to
Yes.
call it that, for you to need 4 ambulances to go out in a day's time
Yes.
and pick up animals.
Right, and they're from a variety of places. Some of them are stray domestic animals. We do a lot of wildlife rescue. And then we also go to people's houses. If for people that can no longer keep their pets, that's some of the work that we do as well, is to go. Again, we'd rather have someone call us up and say, we can no longer take care of our cat, rather than just let it out the door to fend on its own. So our ambulances do a wide variety of calls, and it's always a mix of lots of different things.
It's always a mix of
Always
a
a
lot
mix.
of pain, all kinds of pain. I remember my elderly neighbor had a cat dying of cancer that was not remediable, and he didn't have much money, and he called the Animal Rescue League, I believe, and they came and they euthanized the cat on the premise so that, you know, he didn't have to take him out of the house. I remember.
Yeah, we like to try to do that when possible. It's not always possible, but whenever we do, we do lower cost euthanasia. So for people who maybe have elderly pets who can't necessarily go to a full service veterinarian to have their pet euthanized, we do that at the shelter as a public service, and we charge, you know, minimal fees in comparison. And everyone who works there is so compassionate that we treat every animal with the dignity I think they deserve in that time of their life.
Yeah. So you have the pain of the animals that are suffering emotionally and physically, and the pain sometimes of the owners that are suffering.
Oh yeah, it's really hard. Anyone who's lost a pet knows how difficult that is, and people will bring their pets to us that are geriatric or severely injured, and it's very, very difficult because you know that animal has touched their lives, and the people are emotional, and it's difficult.
And for those of you, I know now some of you out there think everything is funny, and you might not be that polite to animals. But animals, well, I've kind of lost my thought on that one, but the idea that animals mean as much to people as people mean to people. That's my point. I mean, not to everyone. Some people might throw a stone at a cat, and if you're a young person or an older person, I know some people have a thing about cats. They don't like them, or they say they're allergic to them, or which may be the case, but they also have a funny feeling about cats, that there's something strange or that they're evil. Movies have presented them this way. Please don't feel this way, and animals are worthy of as much respect as any living thing, and people can be as fond and loving or even more of an animal than of a human. They can just have that strong of a love bond together.
Yes, oh, most definitely. And I think that's very true what you said about cats. In shelters in the Northeast, at least, we've made great strides with our dogs. We're not seeing nearly as many dogs as we have in past years, puppies I should say, because people are being more responsible about their dogs. But cats are not the same story. We still see a lot more cats than we do dogs, and I think it's because people don't view cats as being able to develop as strong of relationships with people as dogs, when it's so untrue, and they really can become some of the most devoted companions and the most rewarding companions. And so it's important, I think, for people to realize that cats are just as important as dogs and can provide just as much love as a dog can. I think people think of them as independent and sometimes mean and all these things.
Their so-called independence is a wonderful thing which is not true in a lot of cases, but where they say the cat is the master and you're the servant, that the cat chooses you, you don't choose the cat. But if you would just allow yourself to relax and leave animals alone and just observe them, let the nature and glory of animals unfold. Don't have any prejudgments about it. And you know what it is too? Sometimes people are brought up to mistreat or not like animals, or things are done to them and animals are their scapegoat. You know, they've experienced some kind of mini brutality and they pass it on to creatures that they can have the advantage over. So sometimes it's that. But a wonderland awaits you. There's nothing more fascinating than the moves of a cat when they just turn their head a little bit this way, or they move their paw a little bit this way, or you can, and the idea too that animals don't think, what a foolish idea. We won't prove that today, but it wouldn't take more than a first grader to prove to you that animals think.
Oh, most definitely. They're very, very intelligent creatures, to be appreciated for that ability. It's amazing what they do. We had a cat in our adoption center once that she had a large area to sort of move around in, and it had a latch that you had to actually lift up and turn. And every morning for about a week I would come out and she would just be out running around with just in the adoption center. And I kept thinking that the adoption staff was letting her out at the end of the night, and they kept saying no. And she had actually figured out how to lift up the latch, turn it, and push the door open. And she just figured that out on her own from watching everyone do it. It was amazing. So
my family cat, my mother was feeding some strays, and of course the cats watch who's eating what, and so my cat is not mine, but my family's cat is really too fat, and he had eaten already. And so now he saw that another cat was going to get fed, and so he could smell the food, and the can was in the sink in the kitchen. So he watched us, you know, and to see what we're doing, and then he kind of jumped down very close to where he was and sat in a place he usually never sits and just casually looked around. And then when he thought that the coast was clear, he went into the sink and was lapping up the remains of the food, you know, calculating it and meditating it the whole step of the way.
Definitely. They have a whole thought process, and they think and they plan, definitely. They're amazing creatures.
Yes. Now, once again, I'll say to you, which I never would do because I don't believe in soliciting funds, but I think this would be a very worthy cause. And personally, if I had to go to the Animal Rescue League, I would probably melt like rubber, you know, just at the thought of it, to see all the strays and all the animals, you know, not knowing what will happen to them next and fearing for the worst because they're in a helpless predicament. As good as it is, they have no control over the situation.
Right.
They're in bad situation.
Well, and it's something important to think about too, that as shelter workers, we don't put them in those situations. So it's none of our fault that those animals are there. And so we try to do the best that we can, but it is important. I think people do go to shelters and they feel sad, and perhaps they get depressed by seeing the animals in the situation they are. and I think sometimes people get angry at us, the shelter, and really it's emotionally hard on the shelter workers because we all know that we're not responsible. We're not the ones that had put those animals in those cages or took on the responsibility of pet and then couldn't commit. And so I think it can be very hard emotionally to feel like the public isn't supporting us in what we do or appreciating what we do, and viewing us as the bad guys, so to speak, because I don't think we are the bad guys. I think we're their lifeline at that point when they don't have a home to go to. And we're always striving to try to change that, and I think we're moving in the right direction, but through humane education programs and going into schools with children and try to teach them about responsibility. And it's just one of the aspects that we try to pursue to try to help change our situation. And really, any shelter, we're in the business to put ourselves out of business, is what we like to say.
Yes, I was just going to say, the fewer animals you would have coming in, the better world it would be.
Right. And so that really is our goal, to the ideal world, we wouldn't have to be there at all. But we're not ideal, so we're there to do the best we can.
So you definitely want to be sure you spay and neuter animals, or if you see some on the street that will be reproducing, be compassionate and maybe fun for them to be neutered, or help a neighbor with doing that, so that there won't be a lot of new animals born.
Especially cats.
Especially
cats. There's a lot more stray cats, and I think since people do have indoor-outdoor cats and they're not supervised, that we see a lot more litters of kittens and pregnant cats. And so I would encourage all people that do own cats, definitely spay and neuter them, because while the dog problem has gotten better in the Northeast, the cat problem hasn't. So, and we have our spay wagon, and us and some other Alliance for Animals, and I think the MSPCA as well, has some programs to help people who perhaps can't afford to go to a full-service veterinarian get their cat spayed and neutered and vaccinated. It's the spay wagon, it's called, and for a minimal fee you can get all the basic medical care for your cat, and then it will go miles in helping us combat our pet overpopulation problem.
Right. Really, there's great need for adoption, and there's a great need for foster caring for animals that are recovering. But most of all, we'd like to work on prevention, that you'd be aware of not to have animals reproducing and being unwanted or getting purchased. Getting purchased in stores. On top of that, we have all these animals out there. If you want an animal and you're willing to dedicate yourself to an animal, go to the Animal Rescue League. Go to MSPCA. Don't go buy it in the pet store. If you need a dog, you don't need to buy the perfect breed dog. Please go and get them from the adoption centers, all these animals in need.
And it would be nice, too, I think, for people to be open-minded when they go to an adoption center. It's not going to be all kittens. There's going to be cats of a large variety of sizes, ages, colors, shapes, everything. So we want people to be open-minded, and even though you may go in thinking you want a kitten, if there isn't any there, look around, because there's a lot of adult cats that need homes and adult dogs that need homes. So, and they deserve it just as much. And so we'd like people to just not pass them by as well and give them a shot. I adopted her when she was a year old, and she's fantastic. And and adult pets bond just as much, if not more, than the younger ones, because I think they appreciate you that much more.
Oh yeah, and anyway, like we mentioned with the cranky cat, you don't necessarily need the lap cat in the beginning. You don't need that. You'd be amazed at what great pleasure and joy you'd get working with the cranky cat.
Right, and it's hard to judge them entirely. It's an unnatural environment for them. Stressful because there's a lot of people around, and so it's hard to judge them entirely.
They're defending themselves for
Right.
their lives. They know they could end up getting euthanized. Ladies and gentlemen, all these animals and some of them getting euthanized.
So I think that you can't entirely, when you go to adopt a pet, don't entirely judge them by what you see, and maybe take a little chance on that cat who might be a little bit cranky, but you know that in their previous home was a fantastic cat. They're worth it, and sometimes they are the most rewarding pets of all.
Mm-hmm.
So.
And it's also not only always what the pet can give you, it's what you can give the pet.
Yep.
Yeah, really, if you want the pet just because you need something, maybe that's not the best motive, you know,
Right.
just because you only need something out of the pet.
No, and I think it's just as much about what you can give them. Some of just Tiona, who you have right there, she was an older shepherd. She's 7 years old. She was with us for about 2 months, and she did have some hip dysplasia. So we knew that she would have maybe more medical costs involved in having her as a pet than some other dogs. And so these people came in, they saw her, and they knew that financially they would be able to provide that for her and make sure she was comfortable and her hips weren't hurting. So just as much as she's giving back to them, they're giving to her because they gave her a home that she deserves and that is perfect for her because they really can provide all that she needs.
And she looks so sad, I must say, in this picture.
She was such a wonderful dog. She's what we call our desk dog, so she's the dog that got to stay behind with the staff because she just would relax there all day and rest and get so much attention. So that was her spot behind the adoption desk.
Can you imagine animals just being able to relax under these circumstances? I saw something, I don't know if it's true, on TV about an animal that was abused and burned, and it's had open skull area forever and permanent scarring, and that animal still let people pet it and love it after this horrible abuse.
Oh, it's amazing.
And I guess there are stories like that. You know, how can an animal do that? How can an animal relax in the midst of such uncertainty and grief?
Oh, they're amazing in their tolerance of pain, and just, you do see these animals that must be in a lot of pain, and they still are trusting and affectionate and really amazing, just so stoic. And
they are stoic.
Stoic, yeah.
They are stoic. In other words, ladies and gentlemen, we have things to learn. And as we're coming, things to learn from the animals. So please support the Animal Rescue League. Please adopt one of their animals if you have it in your heart to take on, if you have a desire. Please do that. Please be a foster provider for when animals need temporary care. And please do any other kind of volunteer work that they might need. Please spay and neuter your pets. What do you think about pets that run wild, that seem to have an okay life where there's grass and fields and catch mice and so on?
Do you mean maybe like feral cats, or?
Yeah, feral cats, for example.
I think that, well, feral cats are if they're managed properly. The life of a feral cat is a hard one because they're like wild animals and they get injured and ill. But there's a lot of groups that manage the feral cat colonies, so they make sure they're healthy, they make sure they're spayed and neutered, and I think that's okay. But it is a tough life, and I don't think that people should just let their pets run free.
Oh my goodness, no.
Yeah.
But I'm saying, if you see a cat, like I do a lot, that is making it on its own by unfortunate circumstances, you know?
Right, I mean, I think that if people have stray cats or whatnot that they want to take care of in their neighborhood, provided they're spayed and neutered and not reproducing, because a lot of the
They'll
problem is stray cats. I think as long as people are watching out for the welfare and to make sure they're not suffering or injured or ill, I think it's probably okay.
Right. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we love animals. We love them. We're going to do everything we can to help them. I want to thank Melissa Cox, Adoption Supervisor at the Animal Rescue League, for appearing on the show with her feline companion, Ella, who's been so nice throughout.
She's been so good.
So nice throughout, because Ella believes in all these animals as well. And as we're getting ready to leave the show, I'm going to put up some more pictures of the kind of critters that should touch your heart. And for those of you, if there are some people out there who think, oh, why not for humans? There's so many people in need too. I know there's a line of thought like that, but gee whiz, we all feel, we all have brains. Believe me, we all have a right to be here, a right to live, a right to nature. And in a world, a godly world, and I'm not going to get religious on you, but a godly world is a world that provides and understands and shares and appreciates all that lives and allows all that lives its fullness of being alive and being, relatively situated in a decent circumstance. So here are some pictures of the other critters, and we will just remember the animals. And what I'll do, Lita Booth is our director tonight, Henry Lopez, the coordinator. What I'll do, Lita, is I will show these pictures in silence, and then when I'm done showing the pictures, I will say good night. What's the name of that one?
That is Sam.
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 This is?
Dexter. And that's Abigail.
Once again.
And that's our friend Tiona.
Once again.
Timmy. And Max.
Thank you, Melissa.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ella. Remember, people, we love animals, and we're going to do everything we can for them. And also, people, let's get the animals out of the laboratory. Good night. Thank you for watching.
It's fun and it's warm.